The first time I saw Julian Navarro, he was a supernova in a room full of flickering candles. At 22, he strode into that crowded Brooklyn bar like he owned the night. Sharp jawline, eyes like a storm over the desert, and a laugh that could make anyone feel like they mattered. I, Marcus Tate, was just another face in the crowd, a 24-year-old graphic designer nursing a beer and a quiet crush that would haunt me for years. It was 2018, and Williamsburg pulsed with ambition and heartbreak. Julian was a rising star in the indie music scene, his guitar riffs and soulful lyrics turning dive bars into sanctuaries. I'd moved to New York from a small Ohio town, chasing dreams of art and freedom, but I was still finding my footing. That night, our eyes met across the room, and for a fleeting second, I thought he saw me, really saw me. But then his bandmate, Claire, tugged him away, and I was left in the shadows, where I'd stay for far too long. Our paths kept crossing, though, in that cruel way fate dangles hope. I started designing posters for his band, Midnight Pulse, after a mutual friend connected us. Julian was magnetic, always surrounded by fans, friends, and fleeting lovers. I was the quiet one, sketching in the corner, memorizing the way his hands moved over his guitar, the way his voice cracked when he sang about loss. I told myself I was content just being near him, but every smile he gave someone else carved a little deeper into my chest. By 2019, I was in love with him, though I'd never admit it out loud. Julian was straight, or so everyone assumed. He dated women like Claire, with her wild curls and fearless energy, or Sophia, a poet who seemed to float through life. I was just Marcus, the guy who fixed his band's website when it crashed, who brought coffee to late-night rehearsals, who listened when Julian ranted about his dreams or his fears. I was his friend, his shadow, invisible in the ways that mattered most. One night, after a sold-out show in Bushwick, Julian collapsed onto a couch backstage, sweat-soaked and grinning. "Marcus, man, you're my rock," he said, slinging an arm around me. My heart stuttered, but I played it cool, muttering something about the new poster design. He didn't notice the way my hands shook, or how I couldn't meet his eyes. I was 25 now, and I'd learned to bury my feelings deep, where they couldn't ruin the only connection we had. But that night, something shifted. Julian was quieter than usual as we walked to the subway, the city humming around us. "You ever feel like you're running from something, but you don't know what?" he asked, his voice raw. I wanted to say, "I'm running from you, from the way you make me feel alive and invisible all at once." Instead, I shrugged and said, "All the time." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment, I thought he might see the truth. But he just clapped my shoulder and said, "You're a good guy, Marcus." And I hated how much those words hurt. Over the next year, Julian's star kept rising. Midnight Pulse landed a record deal, and suddenly he was on tour buses, not subway cars. I stayed behind, working freelance gigs, designing their album art, and watching his life unfold through Instagram posts. He'd call me late at night sometimes, voice slurred from whiskey or exhaustion, talking about the pressure, the loneliness, the fear of losing himself. I'd listen, my heart aching, knowing I'd give anything to be the one he turned to, not just as a friend, but as something more. In 2020, the world shut down, and so did Julian's tour. He came back to Brooklyn, crashing at my tiny apartment because his roommate had bailed. For 3 months, it was just us, cooking bad pasta, binge-watching sci-fi shows, and talking until dawn. I saw sides of him no one else did. The way he'd hum softly when he was nervous, the way he'd stare out the window when he thought I wasn't looking, like he was searching for something he'd lost. I fell harder, and it was torture. Every laugh, every brush of his arm against mine, was a reminder of what I couldn't have. One night, during a power outage, we sat on my fire escape, sharing a bottle of cheap wine under a sky too bright with city lights to show the stars. "Marcus," he said, his voice low, "you're the only one who gets me. Like, really gets me." My breath caught, but before I could respond, he laughed it off, saying, "Don't let that go to your head, man." I smiled, but inside I was breaking. I wanted to tell him everything, how I'd loved him for years, how I'd memorized every curve of his smile, how I'd stay in his shadow forever if it meant being close to him. But I didn't. I couldn't risk losing him. That summer, Julian started dating Elena, a photographer with a laugh like sunlight. She was kind, talented, and perfect for him in ways I'd never be. I watched them together at a rooftop party, her hand in his, and I felt like I was drowning. I left early, claiming a deadline, but really, I just couldn't breathe. Back home, I stared at my sketch pad, drawing his face from memory, letting the lines blur with tears I hadn't let myself cry in years. By 2021, I knew I had to let him go. I couldn't keep living for stolen moments, for the scraps of his attention. I started pulling away, taking fewer gigs with the band, skipping their shows, answering his calls with texts instead. Julian noticed, of course. He'd text things like, "Yo, Marcus, you good?" Or "Miss you at rehearsal, man." I'd lie, say I was busy, but the truth was, I was trying to save myself. I started dating, too, a guy named Leo, who was sweet and steady, but every date felt like a betrayal of my heart. One night, Julian showed up at my apartment unannounced, eyes wild, hair a mess. "Why are you ghosting me, Marcus?" he demanded, pacing my tiny living room. "Did I do something? Tell me, man, because I can't lose you." His voice cracked, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, raw and unguarded. My resolve crumbled. "You didn't do anything," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need space." He stared at me, hurt flashing across his face, and for the first time, I wondered if he felt something too. But he left without another word, and I was alone again, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The weeks after Julian's visit were a blur of regret and silence. I threw myself into work, designing logos for startups and avoiding anything that reminded me of him, his music, his band, the bars we used to haunt. But New York was too small, too full of him. I'd see his face on a poster in a coffee shop, hear his voice in a song playing on someone's phone, and it was like a knife twisting in my gut. I missed him. God, I missed him, but I couldn't go back to being his shadow, loving him from a distance while he lived a life that didn't include me. Leo, my new boyfriend, was everything I should have wanted. At 28, he was a high school art teacher with a gentle smile and a knack for making me laugh. We'd go to galleries, share ice cream in Prospect Park, and talk about our dreams. But every time he reached for my hand, I'd feel a pang of guilt, like I was cheating on Julian, even though Julian had never been mine. Leo deserved better, and I knew it. So, one rainy afternoon in a quiet cafe, I ended things. "You're not all here, Marcus," Leo said, not angry, just sad. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I wanted to tell him I already had, but it was a love I couldn't keep. Meanwhile, Julian's life was unraveling. I heard through mutual friends that he and Elena had broken up, something about her wanting more commitment than he could give. Midnight Pulse was struggling, too. Their label was pushing for a poppier sound, and Julian was fighting to keep his music raw. He started drinking more, showing up to gigs late. His usual spark dimmed. I wanted to reach out, to be there like I always had, but I couldn't. Not when every call, every text, felt like stepping back into a cage of my own making. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late 2021, and I was at a small gallery opening in the Lower East Side, showcasing some of my digital art. I hadn't seen Julian in months, but there he was, standing in the doorway, his leather jacket damp from the rain. He looked different, thinner, tired, his eyes carrying a weight I hadn't seen before. "Marcus," he said, his voice rough, "can we talk?" My heart pounded, but I nodded, leading him to a quiet corner of the gallery, away from the chatter and wine glasses. He didn't waste time. "I messed up," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I've been losing everyone, Elena, the band, my head. But you're the one I can't lose, Marcus. I didn't realize how much you meant until you were gone." His words hit me like a tidal wave, and I wanted to believe them, but years of longing had taught me caution. "Julian, I've always been there," I said, my voice shaking. "But you never saw me." "Not really." He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "I see you now," he whispered, and for the first time, I felt the weight of his gaze, like he was finally looking at the man I'd always been. We left the gallery, walking through the rain-soaked streets, talking like we hadn't in years. He told me about the pressure of fame, the fear of losing his identity, the way he'd pushed people away because he didn't know how to let them in. I told him about my own struggles, coming out to my conservative family, the loneliness of loving someone who didn't love me back. For once, it felt like we were equals, not a star in his shadow. At a diner, over greasy fries and cold coffee, he reached for my hand. "I don't know what this means," he said, "but I know I don't want to lose you again." My heart screamed to say yes, to dive in, but my head held back. I'd spent years loving him. Could I trust him with my heart now? The next few months were a dance of hope and fear. Julian was trying. I could see it. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout, sit through my rants about bad clients, even come to my art shows. But he was still figuring himself out. He'd never dated a man before, never even questioned his sexuality until now. Sometimes he'd pull back, his old habits of running from closeness creeping in. I'd catch him staring at me, like he was wrestling with something bigger than both of us, and I'd wonder if I was setting myself up for heartbreak again. One night, at a tiny venue in Greenpoint, Midnight Pulse played a comeback show. Julian had written a new song, raw and haunting, about finding light in the dark. As he sang, his eyes found mine in the crowd, and I swear, it felt like he was singing to me. After the show, he pulled me backstage, his hands trembling. "Marcus, I'm scared," he admitted. "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. I want you." It was the closest he'd come to saying he loved me, and it took everything in me not to cry. I kissed him then, under the dim backstage lights, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just a shadow. I was his. That kiss changed everything, and nothing. Julian and I were together, but it wasn't a fairy tale. At 27, I was ready to love openly, to build something real. Julian, at 25, was still navigating a world where his identity was shifting beneath him. We'd spend nights tangled in each other's arms, whispering dreams in my cramped apartment. But by morning, he'd sometimes grow distant, like he was scared of what we'd become. I tried to be patient, to give him space to figure out who he was, but every hesitation felt like a crack in my heart. Brooklyn became our backdrop, a city of contradictions, gritty and beautiful, like us. We'd walk along the East River, sharing stories of our pasts. Julian told me about growing up in a tight-knit Latino family in Queens, where expectations weighed heavy, where being anything but straight wasn't something you talked about. I shared my own battles, leaving Ohio, where my parents still prayed I'd change, and finding a home in New York's chaos. We were two men carving out a space for ourselves, but it wasn't easy. Julian's bandmates didn't know about us, and neither did his fans. He wasn't ready to come out, and I didn't push him, even though it hurt to hide. The world outside wasn't kind, either. In 2022, anti-LGBT sentiment was bubbling up again, with protests and laws making headlines. One night, we were at a bar in the village when a drunk guy started yelling slurs at a couple holding hands. Julian tensed, his hand tightening around mine under the table, but he didn't say a word. Later, He admitted he was terrified, not of the guy, but of what it meant to be seen with me. "I'm not ashamed of you, Marcus," he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to be this person yet." I wanted to scream that I'd waited years for him, that I deserved more than half a heart. But I just held him, because love, I was learning, meant carrying someone else's fears, too. Still, there were moments of pure magic. One evening, we drove to Coney Island, the boardwalk quiet in the off-season. Under the fading lights of the Wonder Wheel, Julian pulled me close and danced with me. No music, just the sound of waves and our laughter. "You make me feel like I can breathe," he said, his forehead against mine. I wanted to freeze that moment, to live in it forever, but life doesn't work that way. The next day, he got a call from his label. They wanted him to tour again, this time solo. The idea of him leaving, of me being left behind again, made my stomach churn. The tour loomed over us like a storm cloud. Julian was excited but torn, talking endlessly about new songs, new cities, but also about how he didn't want to lose what we had. I tried to be supportive, designing his tour posters, hyping him up, but inside, I was terrified. What if distance pulled us apart? What if he found someone else, someone easier, someone who didn't challenge the life he'd always known? I pushed those thoughts down, focusing on the present, on late-night talks, on the way he'd kiss me like I was his anchor, on the way we were building something fragile but real. Then came the fight. It was a humid August night, and we were at my place, arguing about the tour. "You're acting like I'm abandoning you," Julian snapped, pacing. "This is my career, Marcus. My dream." I exploded. "And what about me? I've been here, Julian, through everything. Your breakups, your doubts, your chaos. When do I get to be more than your safe place?" He froze, his face a mix of guilt and anger. "You think this is easy for me? I'm trying, Marcus. I'm trying to be what you need." I wanted to believe him, but the years of waiting, of loving him in silence, poured out. "I've loved you for years," I said, my voice breaking. "And I'm tired of feeling like I'm not enough." He stared at me, speechless, then grabbed his jacket and left. The door slammed, and I sank to the floor, wondering if I'd just lost him for good. For weeks, we didn't speak. Julian left for his tour, and I threw myself into my art, painting canvases full of longing and rage. Friends tried to set me up, but I couldn't move on. Every song on the radio felt like him. Every corner of the city held a memory. I started to wonder if I'd been wrong to push him, if I'd asked for too much too soon. But then I'd remember the years I'd spent in his shadow, and I knew I couldn't go back to that, no matter how much I loved him. The silence between us stretched into months. Julian's tour took him across the country, Chicago, Austin, LA, and I followed his journey through grainy Instagram stories and fan posts on X. He looked happy, or at least he played the part well, but I knew him too well. The tightness in his smile, the way his eyes didn't quite shine, it was the same look he'd had when he was lost. I wanted to reach out, to tell him I was still here, but pride and pain kept me silent. I'd spent years loving him in the dark. I needed him to choose me in the light. In early 2023, I got a call from Claire, his old bandmate. "Marcus, you need to come to his show in Philly," she said, her voice urgent. "He's not okay. He needs you." My first instinct was to say no. Why should I run to him again? But something in her tone, a mix of worry and desperation, made me book a train ticket. The venue was a small club, packed with fans chanting Julian's name. I stayed in the back, hidden in the crowd, watching him perform. His voice was raw, his songs heavier than before, like he was pouring out pieces of his soul. When he sang a new ballad, Shadows Light, the lyrics hit me hard. I ran from the one who saw me true/now I'm lost, and I'm reaching for you. My throat tightened. Was that about me? After the show, I found him backstage, alone, staring at a half-empty beer. "Marcus," he said, his voice a mix of shock and relief. Before I could speak, he was on his feet, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was scared. I didn't know how to love you the way you deserve." I pulled back, searching his face. "Then why didn't you fight for me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He took a deep breath, his eyes locked on mine. "Because I didn't think I was enough for you. But I'm done running, Marcus. I love you. I've loved you for longer than I knew how to say." Those words, the ones I'd waited years to hear, broke something open in me. We talked for hours that night, in a quiet diner near the venue, laying everything bare, his fears of coming out, my pain of loving in silence, the messy, beautiful truth of us. He told me he'd come out to his family, that it had been hard but freeing. He'd even told his fans, posting a simple message on X, "I'm learning who I am, and I'm not hiding anymore." The backlash was there, but so was the support, and he was ready to face it all with me. We didn't fall back together easily. Love, I learned, isn't a single moment. It's a choice made every day. Julian moved back to Brooklyn, and we started over, slowly. We went to therapy, both together and alone, untangling the years of hurt and hope. He wrote songs about us, about love that grows through cracks in the pavement, and I painted canvases full of color, of him, of us. We faced the world together, holding hands at pride parades, ignoring the stares, building a life that was ours. By 2024, we were living together in a small loft in Dumbo, our walls covered with my art and his lyrics. One evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony, watching the city glow, Julian took my hand. "You were always my light, Marcus," he said, his voice steady, even when I was too blind to see it. I kissed him, feeling the weight of all those years, the longing, the pain, the love that never gave up. "You're my home," I said, and I meant it. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We'd faced shadows, his, mine, the world's, and come out stronger. Love, I realized, isn't about being seen by everyone. It's about being seen by the one who matters most. And for the first time, I wasn't in Julian's shadow. I was by his side, exactly where I was meant to be.